There is a word in this passage that readers have been trying to explain away for 2,000 years, and the attempt to explain it away is precisely the problem. The word is mu ior sigma epsilon omega, missio, and it means exactly what it looks like to hate. Jesus says that anyone who comes to him and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, cannot be his disciple. The word is there in the Greek. The translators did not invent it. It has been rendered as hate in nearly every English version for 500 years, and yet the church has spent most of that time pretending it means something else. That is not because the word is unclear. It is because the word is unbearable, and the unbearable truth is that Jesus chose it. But here is the tension that makes the whole thing worse. This same Jesus told his disciples to love their enemies. He commanded honor for parents. He wept over Jerusalem. He forgave the people executing him. He is not a man who threw the word hate around casually. So when he uses hate as the condition for discipleship, it does not fit the portrait we have constructed of him. And the text does nothing to resolve that discomfort. It just sits there. Luke does not add a clarifying note. He does not pull the punch. He records the word in its raw, jagged form and lets it land on every reader who comes to this passage hoping to find a gentle invitation. The desire to soften it is not a mark of sensitivity. It is a mark of how seriously the text is cutting into something we have all been trained to protect. Nobody wants to hear that their deepest attachments might be an obstacle to following Jesus, so we do the only thing we can. We reach for a euphemism. The euphemisms are familiar. We say Jesus was using hyperbole. We say he was speaking in the extreme language of the Middle East. We say he could not have meant actual hatred because that would contradict his teaching on love. All of that sounds reasonable. None of it is pulled from the text. The text never tells us he was exaggerating. The text never tells us to moderate his language. The text simply presents the demand and leaves it standing in the middle of the road, blocking the way for anyone who wants to be a disciple without paying the price. What makes it worse is that the people who first heard this saying would not have heard it as hyperbole either. They would have heard it as something far more concrete than we can imagine from our comfortable distances. In first-century Palestine, the family was not merely a collection of emotionally significant people. It was the entire structure of social and economic survival. Your family was your identity card, your inheritance, your safety net, your marriage arrangement, your burial plot, and your place in the world. To be cut off from your family was not like being unfriended on social media. It was to lose your legal standing, your financial security, your protection in times of famine, and the very people who would care for you in your old age. A person who left his family for a wandering rabbi was not making a lifestyle choice. He was walking away from everything that made life possible. And when that rabbi said you must hate your father and mother to follow him, the audience would have heard a concrete demand to sever the most basic bond a human being has. They would not have thought it was a metaphor for healthy boundaries. They would have thought it was a recruitment speech for social suicide. So what do we do with the word? The Greek is clear enough, but Jesus did not speak Greek when he said this. He spoke Aramaic, and behind the Greek word that Luke recorded lies a Hebrew way of speaking that has its own logic. The Hebrew verb is Hebrew shin, Hebrew asin, Hebrew nun, Hebrew Hebrew aleph, sein, the word for hate. But in the language of the Old Testament, sein carries a comparative weight that English does not automatically preserve. In Genesis 29, when Jacob marries both Rachel and Leah, the text says that Leah was hated. But the story makes clear what that means. Jacob did not feel emotional disgust toward Leah. He simply loved Rachel more. Leah was hated in the sense of being secondary, less favored, not given the place of first affection. The word is doing comparative work, not emotional work. The same appears in Deuteronomy 21, where a man has two wives, one loved and one hated, and the laws of inheritance make provision for the children of the hated wife. The hated wife is not abused or expelled. She is simply not the one preferred. So when Jesus says you must hate your father and mother, he is speaking in that idiom. He is saying in comparison to your attachment to me, your attachment to the people who gave you life must look like hate. It must feel like a demotion. They do not get first place. They do not get your ultimate loyalty. And that is a demand that does not lose its bite simply because it is comparative. Here is where the attempt to soften the text runs into a wall. The idiom explains the meaning of the word, but it does not reduce the cost. In fact, it raises it. If hate simply meant love less, then Jesus gave the command to love him more, and that might sound like a gentle reordering of priorities. But the word he chose is not love more. He chose a word that, even in its comparative sense, still describes the lesser love as hate. That is not accidental. He could have said, as he does in Matthew's Gospel, that whoever loves father or mother more than him is not worthy of him. Matthew records the softer comparative. Luke records the harsher one. Both Gospels are telling the truth, but Luke's version preserves the original shock of the saying. And that shock is doing something Matthew's softer version does not do. It is forcing the listener to feel the rupture. It is deliberately using language that stings, because the thing being described is supposed to sting. Jesus is not saying your family is worthless. He is saying that anyone who genuinely follows him will discover that the bond to him has become so primary that every other bond, even the most sacred one, begins to look like hatred by comparison. The person who tries to explain away the word has missed the point. The point is not to define hate. The point is to let the word do what it was designed to do: break the assumption that family loyalty and discipleship can always coexist without tension. And for most of us, that is the last assumption we are willing to give up. We can imagine following Jesus somewhere on the margins of our comfortable lives. We can imagine giving up money, time, certain habits, maybe even certain friendships. But the people we love, the ones who shaped us, the ones who have been there since before we could walk, those relationships feel sacred in a way that does not seem to require examination. The idea that Jesus might stand in the same room as our family and demand a greater love than we give them is not just challenging. It is terrifying. So we reach for the interpretation that lets us keep both. We tell ourselves the idiom means we just need to love Jesus a little more, and then everything else can stay exactly where it is. But the text does not let us settle there. The word hate is still on the page, and the reason it is still on the page is that Jesus intended it to be there. He knew that the hardest competition for the human heart is not with the obvious enemies of God. It is with the people we love in ways that feel natural and good. It is with the father whose approval we still crave at 40. It is with the mother whose disappointment we cannot bear. It is with the spouse who wants us to tone down the faith for the sake of family peace. It is with the children whose schedules have quietly become the organizing principle of our existence. Those are the relationships that rarely get questioned. They are the ones that have a hold on us that we do not even recognize because it has been there since the beginning. And Jesus puts his finger exactly there. He does not name the obvious sins. He names the family. He names the most legitimate, most loving, most God-given institutions of human life, and says, unless that love looks like hate compared to your love for me, you cannot be my disciple. That is the open wound of this passage. The idiom tells us the nature of the demand, but it does nothing to soften it. We know what Jesus means. We know he is not calling for cruelty or abandonment or emotional abuse. We know he is demanding first place. And the knowing is exactly what makes it so heavy. Because now we cannot pretend we are off the hook. We cannot say the word means something other than what it means. We have to face the question the passage has been driving at all along. Is there anyone in your life whose hold on you is so strong that if that person rejected Jesus, you would feel torn? Is there a love that competes with your love for Christ in a way that would actually change your decisions? The question is not whether you hate your family. The question is whether you have ever actually allowed Jesus to be first, in the way that first requires every other claim on your heart to step into second place. And if you have never felt that kind of tearing, it may be because you have never actually followed him far enough to discover what he is asking. That tearing is the point. It is not the malfunction of discipleship, it is the certification of it. When Jesus turns to the crowd and speaks these words, he is not correcting their enthusiasm because he wants to shrink the movement. He is revealing that the movement to him is a movement away from everything else, and he refuses to let anyone follow him under false pretenses. The crowd has been walking with him, drawn by miracles and teaching, but walking is not yet following. Jesus makes the distinction painful. He tells them that anyone who does not hate his own family and his own life cannot be a disciple. And then he says the thing that makes the hate concrete: whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. That cross is not a burden you reluctantly bear because life is hard. In the world where Jesus spoke these words, a cross was the last thing a condemned man carried before he died. The audience had seen it. They had seen men forced to carry the beam through the streets while the crowd mocked and the soldiers shoved. The cross was a guarantee. It meant the sentence had been passed. It meant death. So when Jesus says that a disciple must carry his own cross, he is saying that following him means walking toward your own ending. And when he connects that demand to the demand of hate, he is defining what the hate is: a decision to die to every claim that would keep you from him. The cross always makes the hate more intense, not less. We might want to draw comfort from the Hebrew idiom, but the cross will not allow it. You cannot hear that all your attachments must become secondary, then watch a man walk to his own execution as the living illustration of what that secondary love costs, and still imagine discipleship is a matter of reordering your priorities. The cross is not a reordering, it is a death. And the person who carries it is announcing to the whole watching world that he no longer holds anything as his own, not even his next breath. That is the meaning of the hate. It is the refusal to cling. It is the release of every grip. It is the open-handed acceptance that the people you love the most will not survive your obedience intact, and neither will you. That is why the cross comes immediately after the hate saying in this passage. The cross is the shape the hate takes in the visible world. It is the thing that shows everyone around you that you have made a choice and that the choice has cost you. Then Jesus does the strangest thing with the shocked crowd. He tells two parables. A man who intends to build a tower first counts the cost because no one wants to lay a foundation and then run out of money, becoming a laughingstock. A king who goes to war with 10,000 soldiers against an army of 20,000 first asks whether he can win, and if not, he sends an embassy while the enemy is still far away. These parables sound like practical wisdom about planning ahead, but they are offensive in context. Jesus is not counseling the crowd about construction projects and military campaigns. He is offering them an exit. He is saying, if you cannot finish, do not start. If following me will cost you your family, your possessions, your reputation, and possibly your life, and you cannot bear that, then walk away now. Do not begin what you are not willing to complete. The Son of God, who came to seek and save the lost, is actively discouraging people from following him. He is thinning out the crowd. He is giving them permission to choose their families, their possessions, and their comfort, and walk back down the road. And that is not the behavior of a man desperate to grow his movement. It is the behavior of a man who knows that the only people who can follow him are the ones who have already died to everything else. Here the text reaches its sharpest point. Luke tells us that Jesus concludes this teaching with the words, "So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." The word Luke uses here is letter 1F00 pi omicron tau alpha sigma sigma omicron mu alpha iota, apotasomai, a compound of from and arrange, and in the Greek-speaking world it carried the weight of a formal separation. It was the word for taking leave of someone in a way that implied finality. Soldiers used it when they were dismissed from service. Legal agreements used it when a party renounced any further claim. But the word appears earlier in Luke's Gospel in a way that makes Jesus' meaning unmistakable. In chapter 9, a man says to Jesus, "I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home." The Greek verb Luke uses for say farewell in that verse is exactly this word, apotasomai. The man asks permission to go and take formal leave of his household, to arrange goodbyes, to settle his affairs. And Jesus refuses him, saying that no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. Now Luke is using the same word again in chapter 14, when Jesus says that anyone who does not apotasomai with all that he has cannot be his disciple. He is deliberately picking up the thing that earlier follower asked to do. The man wanted to bid farewell to his family before following. Jesus says that to be his disciple, you must bid farewell to everything. Not pause, not return, not finish the emotional goodbyes first. The farewell is not a preparation for following. The following is the farewell. And that is the true meaning of the hate, a departure so complete that you never look back to see who is watching you go. This is the tension that the text has been holding since the word hate first appeared, and it will not release until we understand one thing about the nature of love. The reason Jesus demands this kind of break is not because he wants to destroy your family. It is because no human being can love another human being properly while that person is sitting in the place where God belongs. The moment you make a parent, a spouse, or a child the center of your world, you stop seeing them as they actually are and start needing them to be what only God can be. You need them to give you security, and they cannot. You need them to give you identity, and they will fail. You need them to approve of you, to protect you, to never leave you, and every one of those needs will crush them. That is how love becomes control. That is how love becomes resentment. That is how a mother's affection becomes the silent demand that her son live the life she chose, and how a husband's tenderness becomes the pressure that his wife conform, and how a father's pride becomes the thin armor over his terror that his children will not carry the family name the way he did. The hate Jesus commands is the violent, merciful surgery that cuts your family out of the place they were never meant to fill. It is the refusal to let the people you love be your God. And only then, when they are no longer carrying a weight they were never designed to carry, can you finally love them as they are. It is not the opposite of love. It is the only thing that makes love possible. That is why the person who has never felt the tearing of this text may be the person who has never tried. If you have always managed to follow Jesus without ever experiencing friction with the people closest to you, the question is not whether you are blessed. The question is whether you have actually made him first or merely added him to an arrangement that already suited you. For many of us, the anger this passage produces is the tell. When a text cuts at the deepest attachment of our lives and we immediately start arguing against it, protecting the relationship, we are revealing that the attachment has become an idol. It feels like love, but it is functioning as a god. The person who has surrendered to Christ knows that surrender will cost them something, and often what it costs them is the unexamined loyalty to a family system that has always told them who to be. That journey may require a season of saying no to the expectations that shaped you. It may require moving, changing your patterns, refusing the narrative your parents wrote for you, and enduring the accusation that you have become cold. That is the cross, and the cross is not a metaphor for a mildly inconvenient discipleship. It is the instrument you carry, because you have already consented to the death of the old self that needed approval, the old self that bent to pressure, the old self that would sacrifice obedience to keep the peace. When you carry that cross, something changes in how you give yourself to the people around you. The frantic need to please them dissipates. You can stand in front of your family and actually love them, tell them the truth, pray for them, serve them, give up your own preferences for them without the constant undercurrent of anxiety about whether they love you back. Because that anxiety was never really about them. It was about your soul being bankrupt. When Christ holds the center, you are no longer scanning every human face for the belonging only he can supply. And that is the moment you become safe to hold other people. They can disappoint you, disagree with you, leave you, and your heart does not collapse because the weight of your existence is no longer resting on their shoulders. The hatred of the passage produces this liberation. It is the severe mercy of being able to say to your mother and father, your wife and husband, your children, that you love them, but you belong to Christ, and that belonging is the foundation on which your love for them is finally built. You do not have to choose between hating and loving. You have to hate them as idols so that you can love them as people. The word hate stands. It stands at the head of the verse, and it does not move. The idiom explains that it is a comparative hatred, a love that is so far exceeded by love for Christ that the old love looks like hate by contrast. But the idiom does not soften the demand, because the demand is absolute. You must bear this cross. You must renounce everything. You must make the farewell that does not look back. And the most demanding truth of this entire passage is that Jesus did not ask you to do anything he was not already doing himself. Look at him on the road to Jerusalem. He is carrying the cross, and he is not going back to say goodbye to anyone. He is leaving his mother in the hands of others. He is leaving his disciples who will abandon and deny him. He is walking toward the place where the family he created will be reconstituted at the cost of the life he lays down. He did hate them all, in the sense that matters. He allowed every bond he had to be torn apart by his obedience to the Father. And from that cross, with the world crushing around him, he still had enough love left to look down and give his mother to the beloved disciple. That is what the hate finally produces, a love that is not needy, not controlling, not terrified. A love that can give even when it is losing everything. The hate is not the opposite of love. It is the shape love takes when the first command has been obeyed. And if you want to learn it, you have to follow him, not with your family clinging to you, protecting you from the cost, but with the cross on your back and your hands open, carrying the death of everything you held too tight. It will tear, and in the tearing, you will finally understand that the love you were so afraid to lose was never the love you thought it was.